Adam Silver just floated a nuclear option for tanking. Whether you agree or not, in which I think most people don't, it sends a clear message that the league is practically giving up. Tanking has been an issue for eons, and seemingly punished for that same amount of time, with the most recent being the Pacers and Jazz fines, and yet, nothing has fully succeeded in warding tanking off. With these statements, the league is admitting to itself and its fans that losing has become too profitable for it to be disincentivized, and therefore trickles down to the more troublesome fact lying underneath the admission. By admitting that the league can't stop tanking, it's admitting that it can't produce 82 games across 30 teams of pure ethical basketball. Combine that with officiating allegations, plus Adam Silver saying that the league is a highlight sport, sounds like they know the product is messy and it might even be the worst that it's ever been. But the business for them is still booming anyway. The TV deals have gotten signed, the money is getting wired to their accounts, and the league attitude starts to feel less like how do we fix this, and more like the fans will watch anyway. The business side of the league has continued to win, so the actual basketball side in the executive's mind can afford to lose. And so they just have to keep up the image of doing something about it. That's the same way it's been for nearly 100 years. All the way back when a draft system like this was made, where losing became a bigger prize than winning. The NFL draft goes all the way back to 1936, where the worst team automatically got the first pick, already creating the incentive all the way back when. And sure, you can argue that just because the incentive exists does not mean teams were already tanking back then, except the term tanking already originates earlier than the NFL draft. Tanking sources from the term diving into the tank from boxing back in the 1920s, where a boxer or people in the boxer's inner circle would bet against said boxer, and therefore he would go in the ring and intentionally lose the fight for the payout on the bet. This already paints the picture that humans will always attempt to take advantage of the system where they can, ever since the dawn of time. Putting a reward behind losing makes the payoff be weighed against winning. That method followed behind the scenes for years until 1984, when multiple leagues were facing the same issue. The NHL was dealing with an issue of the Pittsburgh Penguins trading away some of their best players as a cover for losing in order to obtain Mario. Simultaneously, the Houston Rockets started the 1983 to 1984 season 20-26. And so after being at a 43 winning percentage halfway into the season, the franchise started intentionally benching their successful starting players for more lengthy amounts of time. While tanking again likely went on for years prior, many cite this as the origin for tanking in the NBA, as following this season right after the Rockets got Hakeem Olajuwon, they switched off of the coin flip system to the system we now infamously know over 40 years later. The NBA Draft Lottery. The lottery didn't remove the incentive, but it made the incentive less certain. And the second the league started changing odds, teams do what teams always do. They learned the new odds, and that's why the lottery eventually gets weighed. That's why the bottom odds continue to get tweaked, but every change is the league trying to find the sweet spot where parity improves but tanking doesn't explode. And every change quietly teaches front offices the same lesson. You don't need to guarantee the top pick for tanking in order for it to be worth it. You just need an expected value to be high enough. Fast forward to the modern era, and the league is trying its biggest anti-tank tweak in decades by flattening the odds in 2019 so that the three worst teams all have the same 14% chance at the top pick, and drawing the top 4 picks instead of the top 3. As time went on, more and more talks began on how to fix it, but that became how teams would exploit it, and then the NBA has to fix that, only for the teams to then exploit it again, and so forth, as is the cycle of again finding any leg up you can through the intricacies of legal language, of rulebooks and contracts.
You must be precise, as the law is a precise endeavor.
And so we come to today, where at the time of recording this, just yesterday, after the blowback of the nuclear option mentioned earlier, Adam Silver proposed 7 new rules to help with tanking. And honestly, some of Silver's proposals are decent rules, and others I think are absolutely terrible. A few of these ideas go straight at late season tanking, a few target repeat tanking, and a few are there because the league knows that fans want to simply see something happen. And that mix is a bit of the problem. You can either fix the issue, or you can manage the image of the issue. Both can work individually depending on what you're trying to accomplish, a surgical PR move to push things under the rug, or an actual effort to fix things broadly. The fans will see your effort either way. But when you combine them, everything starts to get muddy. The real fixes seem watered down and stop looking like actual fixes. And they start looking like the NBA throwing their arms up saying, "Are you happy already?" When you do both at once, it comes off like the league got halfway serious and halfway lazy. The result is a rulebook full of compromises and a fan base that still doesn't trust the actual product the NBA is presenting. You can see that sort of poor planning as we go through the rules, as again, even though I'm in the minority that some of these rules may work, a few of these can be really great for the league. But I suspect due to pressure from the fans and executives, Silver continued to add on more and more potential rules the further down the list that we go, and they continue to just get worse and worse in an effort to essentially throw things at the wall and see what the PR response is, which is where things are bound to be negative. It clouds the actual potential fixes for there to be implemented. It's like making a strawberry banana smoothie and dumping chocolate syrup in it. Now, nobody tastes the fruit, and they only taste the chocolate. To start the new rules off, first round picks can only be protected for top 4 or top 14 picks. Right now, teams can trade picks with all sorts of protections. You can have a top 8 protected, top 10 protected, top 12 protected, and that means that teams are targeting specific ranges as they tank with a level of precision. Adam Silver's idea is to simplify that. If a first round pick is protected, it can basically only be top 4 or top 14. So in plain English, you either protect the true lottery jackpot, or you're protecting the full range of teams that miss playoffs. I like this rule because, again, it basically shortens the range that picks are protected. It has a similar effect to the play-in tournament in the sense that it gives teams clearer lanes to aim for instead of weird middle zones. Getting your pick out of the top 4 so it conveys feels way more realistic than trying to thread the needle and escape something like a top 8 protection. The downside, though, is in trade talks. Protections become much more extreme. Either a very short protection range, which is worse and more risky for the team that's giving up the pick, or a very wide protection range, which becomes worse and a higher risk for the team receiving it. So I think it helps the league and helps clarity, but it would start to make pick negotiations more one-sided and harder to balance in trade talks. The second rule is that lottery odds freeze at the trade deadline. This is one of the best ideas on the list in my opinion. This one goes straight at the late season tanking, the part that everyone sees and complains about, the part that makes March and April feel like they don't matter before playoffs start. Under this rule, your lottery odds would be locked in at the trade deadline, or some point around there. After that date, losing more games would not improve your lottery position. This is a massive change because right now, a team can hit the deadline, realize that their new team and trades are not contending, and the whole season basically changes. Where veterans sit out, the rotations get a little bit more experimental, and development becomes the word of the month. Fans are expected to pretend that it's normal competition, but this rule cuts off the reward for that late pivot. For instance, if Team A is 25 and 30 at the deadline, that gives them probably the 7th best lottery odds, and that's their spot. If they try and go 3 and 24 after that, they don't move up. They just lose the games for no added value, and therefore that immediately stops the incentive for tanking past that point. Now, The biggest problem for this, though, can be seen right away. It isn't necessarily a foolproof fix, it just essentially moves the goalpost. It fixes a lot for the months after the trade deadline, but it makes it so that teams will start to have to tank earlier. If a team sees a failure on the horizon, they may start trying to fail harder and faster. However, tanking still becomes more of a gamble, which is the exact way to think about fixing it. The trade deadline is always crazy because it's basically when the finger is on the pulse for a team. A trade made too prematurely can change a working team's chemistry and make it crash and burn. A team deciding to let it ride even though it's been rough can see that maybe not trading was the wrong decision and now the deadline has already passed. It's a similar situation applied here. A team would need to decide earlier in the season to tank and basically give up even if they still had chances, versus other teams can decide to wait it out further into the season to tank, but then they're closer to the deadline and have less time to. So you might as well just keep trying to compete than half-ass tank. It makes March and April more pure, but February and January potentially less pure. With locking in these odds, it also becomes a weird trade-off in that same way, where it makes certain games more meaningful in a schedule while making other games practically meaningless. If a team is around the 11th and 12th seed, they can lock in their draft chances and try hard for seeding for the play-in, and it makes higher seeded teams mean more for playoff seeding. However, it makes games against teams like the 15th and 14th seed practically meaningless, as they are already mathematically locked out of the playoffs and play-in, and their draft odds are also already locked. Their season is already over logically. A 14th and 15th seed nowadays is watchable because the loser drops for draft compensation. But now it would literally have no substance or effect on anything whatsoever, because their draft is already locked and that's it for their season. All it would do is add to the win-loss for the history books and nothing else. For Rule 3, no top 4 picks in consecutive years. I joked that this might as well be called the Sam Hinkie rule. It's against people performing a process like the 76ers. And this is where I start saying rules become less for the actual league and more for Vegas. If a team is struggling for multiple seasons, a single first-round pick in a sea of mid-players isn't going to magically fix their problems, which makes teams stuck at the bottom for longer. On the other hand, a team repeatedly tanking over and over becomes less watchable, but more importantly, predictable. It's the same reason the league was so against the process to begin with and punished it so severely. People continuously bet against the 76ers for easy free money. The rule makes it where teams repeatedly in the bottom can keep trying to compete since they won't get another pick. But the problem is, even teams that don't tank are repeatedly at the bottom. Hornets, Wizards, and so on. And now those teams repeatedly at the bottom won't get picks even if they're genuinely bad, just further pushing them more and more towards irrelevancy. The problem is this rule doesn't really care why a team is bad. Some teams tank on purpose and others are just genuinely terrible. Some teams have injuries and some teams are just on a bad run. But under this rule, they essentially get all treated the exact same. That's where it can start to get dangerous. Rule 4 says that teams can't pick in the top 4 the year after making the conference finals. This rule is exactly as it describes. If a team makes the conference finals, they cannot have a top 4 pick. This overall improves parity by not letting teams already good to continue to stack up and make a powerhouse. The biggest problem I have comes from a moral standpoint, as it essentially punishes teams for being smart and disincentivizes trades. As much as I don't like the way OKC plays, I always commend the smart way that they've traded up with their roster. Imagine an SGA Paul George trade happening today, and under this rule, if OKC made another finals run, the Clippers pick would automatically fall out of the top 4, which punishes them for actually smart trading for a pick in advance while becoming successful. It prevents dynasties and makes the league more balanced in talent, which is a massive point if the league is thinking of expanding, but it also makes draft picks and trades less valuable, as if a team is doing well, they may not care for draft picks they're bound to lose and be less incentivized in trade talks for them. It's supposed to stop contenders from getting lucky, but in practice, it can also reduce the value of long-term draft strategy, which is one of the smartest things a front office can do. Rule 5 says that lottery odds will be allocated based on 2-year records. This one is a bit strange because it basically undoes what Rule 3 is trying to fix. Essentially, rather than a draft pick being based on an 82-game win-loss, it goes off of a 164 win-loss. This is meant to make tanking more of a long-term investment, which can help fight against it. But it also means that if teams double down, it hurts the league from both a betting and watchable standpoint, which ironically Rule 3 is trying to fix. For instance, a team in the 10th seed at something like 38 and 46 is probably in the top 8 range for the drafts. But if they end up losing the play-in, then the following year they can just decide to stop being a bottom play-in team and want to knock off that few last couple of pegs to help their draft. So they intentionally tank the entire season, and now their combined record is something like 50 and 114. This also means it undoes Rule 2 a bit as well. As we discussed, Rule 2 makes tanking more of a gamble as it becomes either a pulling the trigger too early or too late scenario. But with this rule, knowing your record from the previous season, teams can make a more informed decision on their strategy going forward in the upcoming season and decide before Summer League even starts if they're going to tank or not. Rule 6 says to extend the lottery to include all play-in teams. This is the second to last rule, and as I said, it just seems to be getting worse as we go down. This rule essentially removes the draft lottery entirely, as it essentially just double dips on Rule 2, encouraging play-in teams to compete harder since their draft odds are already equivalent. However, the issue is Rule 2 is much better in practice, while this rule seems to penalize poor teams as their odds are now equal as everyone else. Rule 7 states to flatten odds for all lottery teams. This basically just builds off what I said in Rule 6 and therefore has the same issue. It removes the entire point of the lottery. It definitely ends tanking because it means no teams have better odds than others based on standings, but it also means that the league is now entirely RNG. It means it definitely increases parity, but it now means that teams at the bottom are now simply relying on the heavens in order to not get shafted year after year. So again, the NBA solves one argument, but creates another. And that becomes the entire history of anti-tanking reform in one sentence. You can have too much certainty that a loss will become a good pick, and therefore teams tank. You can have too much randomness, and the bad teams start to feel punished. You have too much punishment, and rebuilds become impossible. And then you have too much freedom, and teams start to game the system. So my issue is not that this list is at all bad. It isn't. There are some real fixes in here, as I said. There are rules that genuinely attack the math behind tanking. But there are also parity patches, edge case rules, and committee-style additions that make the whole package feel bloated. And that's the bigger problem with how Adam Silver rolled this out. If the league had come out with a focused package rule, the reaction might have been different. For example, if they freeze the odds late in the season and add a repeat tanking deterrent. But this is the queer philosophy. People can disagree with it, but at least it sounds like a plan. Instead, what we got feels like a list built under the pressure of PR. Some real incentivized fixes, and others just armor for the fans attacking them. It becomes a lot of what if we tried this versus making the league actually look proactive. The league and Adam Silver simply don't know what to do, and his reaction to every single problem in the league shows that. But what do you guys think? Let me know if you agree with the rules and how I ranked them. And if you want more of Adam Silver's poor decision making as commissioner, you can also check out this video here. Be sure to like and subscribe, and again, comment down below what you think, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace out.